The project management lifecycle. What is the project lifecycle? One of the first things that is important to understand is the difference between the project lifecycle and the project management lifecycle. The project lifecycle usually consists of three major phases. There's the design phase, the monitoring phase, used to control the project, and the evaluation phase. This is usually known as the design, monitoring, and evaluation cycle of a project. Within these three elements of the project cycle, there are 6 phases that go into more detail. The first phase is the concept or idea of the project. The next phase is where the design of the project occurs. Then there is the planning phase and the monitoring phase. And finally, we have the evaluation and learning phases. Those are the typical phases of the project life cycle. The 3 main areas of a project cycle are usually managed by different groups of people. In the design, the proposal, and the funding are usually organized by a group of people within the organization or consultants. Then the implementation and the monitoring of the project are managed by the project manager and the team. And the final phase, which is the evaluation and the audit, in this phase is usually led by different people, including consultants. The work of a project manager focuses on the second area. That is where all the work occurs with some overlap with the design and evaluation areas. It is in this area that the project management lifecycle occurs. The project management lifecycle consists of 6 phases. The initiation phase that begins once a project has been approved. The donor has signed the contract and the organization has appointed a project manager. The planning phase is where most of the project management plans are developed. In the implementation phase is where most of the work happens. The monitoring phase where information is collected and analyzed. The adapting phase where changes are made to the project plans. And the closing phase that signals the project has completed all the work. Between the start and the end of a project, there is a continuous cycle of plan, implement, monitor, adapt, and then plan. That is a key characteristic of the adaptive project management life cycle. Because of the difficulties, risks, challenges, and the uncertainty of development projects, there is a need to create this cycle to help manage the project and continuously adapt it to changes in the environment. These 6 phases also overlap over time. This chart shows the levels of effort and time that happen in a project over time. From the beginning of the project all the way to the end, there are different levels of effort for each one of these phases. In this chart, it's important to highlight the amount of work that goes into the planning phase, as compared with the amount of effort and time that will happen during the implementation phase, where most of the effort and work will be used. This chart shows about the importance of the planning phase, about the need to dedicate the required amount of effort and time to develop the plans that will help in the management of the project. Another important element to understanding this chart is that there are always overlaps between those phases, as we can see that the planning phase doesn't happen only at the beginning of the project when you complete all your plans, but the action of planning also includes the process of adapting, modifying, and improving your plan. And that takes the other half of the effort and time in this phase that overlap into the implementation phase. Here's another chart that shows the various cycles over the life of a project. Because of the high level of uncertainty in development projects, one approach is to break down the project into various cycles. These cycles could be time periods of 6 months to 1 year, depending on the type and duration of the project. The purpose to use various cycles is to go through all these phases many times during the life of the project. The project manager starts with the first cycle and goes through the phases of planning, implementing, and monitoring. Based on the results of the monitoring report, the project manager will adapt and then close the first cycle. For the next cycle, the project manager uses the lessons learned and information from the previous cycle to identify changes to help improve the performance of the project. Changes are made in the original plans and are implemented and monitored. If more changes are identified, the project manager will adapt the project and move to the next cycle. In every cycle, the project manager and the team gain more knowledge, more experience, and have more information to make better decisions. There is a better understanding of the internal and external environment and how they are impacting the project. The ever-changing environment drives the need to make constant changes to the plans, but in each cycle, the changes are easier to make and become smaller. Depending on the type and length of the project, there might be a need to have 2 or more cycles. It all depends on the levels of complexity and risks. The idea behind the project management cycle and the continuous improvement process is that it helps manage uncertainty. The reality is that development projects will always face challenges. There are going to be risks. There are going to be situations where the project manager and the team need to make changes because the conditions have changed in the field and are different from what was planned at the beginning. Or in some other cases, the team identifies opportunities to improve the project, and that requires changes to the initial plans. Development projects need to adapt. There is a constant need to make changes, improvements, and modifications. The application of a cyclical approach during the life of a project facilitates the identification of opportunities and lessons from one cycle to make improvements in the next cycle. If projects didn't have any complexity or risk at all, and all that was planned was in complete certainty, then there will be no need to have these cycles, and the project will just be a linear process with no changes from start to end.